Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell to be notified.
Let's start to talk a little bit about coming out of the pandemic. And one of the things that I want to do here is I do want to do a screen share with you and put you to work a little bit. So just to kind of free think a little bit, just top of mind. And again, go ahead and you can all take yourselves off of mute at this point, because I'm not necessarily going to go around the horn on this one. I want to be able to get some faster input than that. What do you see is the obstacles for coming out of COVID? And anybody who wants to, and I just ask you to kind of give me short phrases as opposed to long explanations. Just
vaccine.
Some people may not take the vaccine.
There's no extra credit for spelling. I'll fix it up. I'll clean it up later.
Process for getting back together. I've already been asked about that, or procedures. You know, and again, those tie into vaccine and all that.
Got it. Anything else?
Fear that we might not have this. Oh.
Being able to sing. We found it's tough. When they're driving stuff, your voice is shot.
Yeah, I think we need to establish standards for what are the conditions under which we feel safe to get back together.
Yeah.
It might mean having masks at meetings through 2021.
We sing in a senior center and we're afraid that we might not be able to go back.
Yeah, location could be a challenge.
We have the same issue with currently no location to sing.
Doug, I'd like to go back to the willingness piece. There's a part of willingness that would be even willingness to rejoin the chapter, for instance, regardless if there's vaccination or, there's just, people have gotten used to maybe not participating, right?
Like enthusiasm for it, yeah.
Yeah, fill their life with something else as if that's a thing, right?
Well, in our chapter, we've been learning a lot of new music. So we're really going to have guys that are going to be very, very advanced, and others are going to really have to play catch up.
When will all this happen?
Anything else?
When we can sing public acceptance.
And lack of paying shows in the beginning.
Yeah.
We're already up against fundraising.
And do you mean in terms of scarcity of sources?
Scarcity of options for raising funds.
Yeah, we have that problem too, because most of our audiences have been in seniors' homes and retirement areas and stuff.
Anything else? I've got one, and that's technical savvy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, depending on your what's cooking in your organization, there's a program called Jamulus that in the whole scheme of things is actually working pretty well in terms of everybody kind of being safe. Singing into the Jamulus app, it actually combines it without a lot of the challenges of Zoom, and it's not exactly child's play, but I can say that it actually worked for me. And I'm not exactly the most technological guy on the planet, and it was still able to work. Not everybody's going to have access to that. I mean, it may certainly have challenges in terms of internet speed and so on. But one of the things we have to kind of take a look at is, just because I can't do everything, does that mean that I can't do anything? And you may want to even consider that for subgroups, you know, to be able to keep higher levels of engagement within groups of people that you can make it work for, even if you can't get everybody going.
Is that something that is cost prohibitive?
No.
Only if you consider free cost prohibitive.
Oh, okay, good.
So that raises the issue of division. Will we be divided our chorus into groups, which then will cause the demise ultimately?
Kind of the haves and the have-nots?
Whether technical, medical, inertia, all the things that had not gotten in the way before, all these things here can rear their ugly head, and then we split. Even the successful ones can cleave a whole piece of it off.
Yep. Good
Yeah,
catch.
we had that trouble just with our Zoom meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Well, there's you know, what's happening at the BHS level. You know, what challenges is BHS facing, and will that, you know, percolate itself down if this goes into 2022, for example? Yeah.
Got it. Anything else as you can see it kind of playing with your chapter? Okay. So let's kind of think.
Exhaustion.
Bob, I think that's more your problem than anybody else.
No, I sense people are exhausted across the board. Yeah.
Is that, you talked about the allostatic load, Pete, thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, can we actually do this another year?
Just to clarify my statement, Bob does all our tech work, and it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's no sense. I mean, there's all kidding aside, Zoom fatigue, COVID fatigue. You know, one of the things that's been a challenge is that people have confused social distancing with physical distancing.
Mm.
I don't know about you, but I've noticed even in my own local hometown here that walking down the street, even if I'm wearing a mask and somebody else is wearing a mask, where historically people would automatically smile and say hello, people are not saying hello, even if they've got masks on. I mean, even if they're well separated. So I think part of the whole exhaustion or part of the fear, if you will, is not even being if we're not careful, we can lose our humanness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as we think about physical distancing versus social distancing.
You have also the problem of going down the street and running into people without masks that you have to avoid.
Right.
Or in stores.
So let's take a look at some of these, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
So if we take a look at, I guess for now, we can kind of start in the order that they were mentioned, see if some of these solutions attack multiple obstacles. Some we may be able to kind of work through tonight, some we may not. But when it comes to the vaccine and solutions, what are your thoughts right now? Before I offer any thoughts, I'd like to hear from the group in terms of what are you thinking is going to be the right answer for you and your organization?
I think it's going to be a step approach, because there's older guys are going to get it, you know, middle guy, it's going to be piecemeal.
And how do you see that playing out?
It's going to be difficult when the older guys are all vaccinated and they just want to come out and go sing, and then the other guys are like, hey, I can't come out. And I don't know. It's going to be tough.
So are you thinking about, if you have some that do have the vaccine and some do not, what are you thinking about as the best approach?
Haven't got there yet. I don't know. That's what we have to figure out.
Okay, so let's kind of talk through it. What do you think it might be a reasonable accommodation? Can we agree that if we try to get the perfect answer, we're liable to create incredible levels of delay, that we're probably better off implementing something good than waiting until something is perfect?
Yes.
As the vaccine rolls out, the incidence of the disease should go down, and hopefully to the point where people who are not vaccinated will not be concerned about getting on the risers and singing with those people who are.
Perhaps we could distance people with vaccines on one side and without on another, potentially.
What are you thinking about in terms of locations? If you knew that part of your group was vaccinated and part would not?
I think there's still going to be a easing into it, finding places to rehearse outside when the weather permits, those kinds of things. Because I really do think that I know, with medical problems with guys, that they're either going to not want to come back and be in a room, or they're just going to be overly cautious. So trying to ease back into it.
We agree that our goal on this is going to be getting people who want to sing together to sing together. Can we agree that's a nice, simple goal?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then let's never lose sight of that. I'm reminded a lot of times, if people work with me before, they've heard me talk about drill bits and holes. And historically, I've talked about the fact that, let's say there was 5.5 quarter-inch of 5.5 million quarter-inch drill bits sold in the United States last year. Nobody wanted a quarter-inch drill bit. What they wanted was a quarter-inch hole. So I say that to you in all seriousness, because if we see ourselves as being in the drill bit business versus we see ourselves being in the hole business, then if we see ourselves in the whole business, then we can think about alternatives. For example, if I was trying to create a quarter-inch hole in the wall behind me, theoretically, I wouldn't need to use somebody's $50 drill bit to do it. I could buy the equivalent of a quarter-inch nail and basically go bang, 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 and I'd have the hole in the wall behind me, and I wouldn't need somebody's $50 drill bit to do it. So let's not lose focus in terms of the end result on all this, is being able to get as many people singing together as we can safely. And I think if we start to think about that, then all those alternatives are all going to make sense. As more and more people get vaccinated, we add them to the mix. As more and more people are vaccinated, that potentially the space that we need to sing in could shrink. I mean, there's a lot of things that could kind of come along the way. I mean, the one advantage that we really do have is that spring will be here, in the not too distant future. Rusty, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, the question, the point you make is very good. The idea of safely is an individual decision. And I think that's one of the things we have to respect. Right. And I don't know how to deal with it. I know what my decision will be for safely. Once I get the vaccination, I'll feel that I am safe. But I don't know how everybody else is going to address that.
So if I can interject too, some of us have been using some technology to enable, safe singing, with technology, with microphones and mixers and things like that. So I think for some groups, a hybrid solution, those that want to sing together, like let's say on risers, we'll use a couple of microphones for that group, and then those that want to be individual, we add those to it. The thing though, I mean, that's a technological solution, right? And that's certainly within grasp for the groups that are doing that. Or you could do a hybrid mix of like Jamulus and microphones and people on a riser. We can talk through those options, and maybe we should have another Hot Rods and Harmony session for that as we come out of this. The more important thing, I think, though, Doug, I'm picking up on from everyone is the desire to come together. I think will be there, but harvesting it so that there can be a priority set to that. That's a priority in safety, but also a priority to come together again, once again.
So one of the things that I ask you to think about in terms of kind of marrying your experience as a member of the outside world and marrying that with your experience as a barbershopper is when you think about what does and I'm going to ask you to humor me on this one. It's going to sound like I'm talking theoretical, but I'm not. Think about what does outstanding customer service mean to you? And just kind of let that kind of noodle around in your head a little bit. Coming out of COVID, what does outstanding customer service mean for one of your chapter members? Or quite candidly, for all of your chapter members? Well, and I suspect that this is going to have to be the ultimate in flexibility. The same way when we think about our customer experience against anything else in the world, that we're pretty good at wanting things our way. I think as chapter leaders, we're going to be we're going to have to be hyper vigilant about making sure that we're really tuned in to what do our chapter members really want at this point in time, and not making any assumptions about what they want. But I wanted to kind of throw that out. Somebody started to talk. I apologize. Go ahead.
Well, let me jump in. I'm not afraid anymore.
Right. And you know what, though? And Rusty, if I can just add in, I agree with you. I'm not actually really afraid anymore either. And I'm ready to get back to it. Let's say I'm, we're along the path maybe further, right? However, what's excellent customer service mean is that when there's a concern, that the person who has the concern feels, I'm going to say it this way, feels loved or feels cared for.
Listen to.
It's important to me that maybe we get to it maybe quickly, but the last thing that someone wants, we don't want to push them away, is you don't want to goad them into it, right? So the excellent customer service, I think, is that they feel embraced and not weirded.
Yep.
Other thoughts, other comments? Okay. So the vaccine step approach kind of speaks to that one. The standards in terms of getting together with masks, we've kind of talked about that as an easing in, as a way of getting started. If you're potentially wearing masks, how does that even impact what songs you may want to try to do in a rehearsal? Alexandria's ragtime band at 180 beats per minute may not be the right answer when you try to wear a mask. It doesn't all have to be ballads.
There's one thing that we've not addressed, and I find our chapter, and probably many chapters, very good at this, that we come together and we unify over the desire to sing songs. and we're pretty private about everything else. And we don't share politics, we don't share morals, we don't share, we don't make judgments about each other. Nobody asks, are you married, divorced, are you gay, or whatever. That conversation doesn't happen. And I think that's a very important thing. And then therefore we all can get together and sing. We're not political. And in fact, we made a real good point over the summer to remind everyone that we're not talking politics leading up to the election. Well, there's something going on here as an obstacle, that there's even in like-minded people, whether politically, socially, morally, whatever, there's a wide variation in attitudes about all of these topics.
Mhm.
And getting together again, unless there's this perfect happening where all the problems disappear, we're going to have to deal with that. And how do you openly ask the question to each individual? And do you, or you just say, here, this is what we're going to do. You're with us or you're not. I mean, that's, you're on the bus or you're not. And we haven't addressed that in here.
Speaking to the point that Rob made, probably from a messaging perspective, trying to craft a message that it's okay for you to join us when you're ready to join us is probably going to be a critical message. Because if I put it out, so to speak, as we're leaving with you or without you, boy, we can tick people off at the speed of light. And all it would take would be one board member to be able to say, well, this is what we've decided we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if it gets positioned that way, you've effectively cut your organization in two pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Because then by definition, you've then just created a we and a they.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what I think the messaging of that is going to be critical. And I think flippant comments from board members is really going to be critical when it comes to, emails or that kind of stuff. If there was ever a time to probably ask fellow board members, and including ourselves, to be able to give those email responses the benefit of sitting for an hour or two, or somebody else's
the next day.
Yeah, sometime like 4 months from now, finally sending out what you really were thinking to say. But having somebody else's eyeballs read that with kind of some fresh eyes before you put it out for a lot of public consumption is probably a smart idea. Because since we don't have the benefit of a lot of face-to-face, communication is even more critical. There's resources that I do want to share with you, but one of the things that I want you to take away from this is, and these stats have been around for a gazillion years, but historically, about 7% of what is said is purely the words, but about 38% is how it is said. And probably the example that I've used with so many of you on this call in the past is you have a little 8-word sentence. I did not say he stole the money. And I can put that out in an email. But depending on where I put the emphasis on those 8 words totally changes the meaning. I didn't say he stole the money. Vehement denial. I did not say he stole the money. I did not say he stole the money. I didn't say he stole the money. I didn't say he stole the money. And I didn't say he stole the money. And depending on where I put that emphasis totally changes what you hear as the receiver of that message. We put something out in email, we've got to hope that the reader of that email is putting the emphasis on those words exactly where we were hoping they would, or we can create all kinds of holy hell from the communications perspective. That's why I hate text messages, unless it's a okay, I'm on my way kind of a thing. and that's why I hate email, because it creates such challenge in terms of, And unless I can write things through the lens of the reader and understand how they're reading it, it is so subject to being misinterpreted. And then we spent 3 days trying to unwind the damage from our one-line email when it got misinterpreted. So I would really encourage you guys to really go really carefully when you're going to put out written communications, that you run it by somebody you trust and kind of read it in terms of how could this thing be misinterpreted, and try to clean that up before you put stuff out. Let me ask a question. I've got just about 9:30 on my end. I've got a couple of things that I would feel obligated just to show you at a high speed, just to make sure that you are aware of all the resources that you have. But I do not want to hold anybody hostage, since we talked about going from 7 to 9:30 tonight. I'm capable of staying on here later if people want to continue to talk through some of these things. But again, I don't want to hold you hostage.
Fine from my perspective.
I'm sorry?
That's fine from my perspective.
I'm good.
Okay.
Or should I say that's fine from my perspective? That's fine from my perspective.
It's fine.
Well, fine.
Whatever.
Fine.
Fine.
So let me.
Will you be sharing these resources in an email to us?
Well, yes, but the good news is you already have them. You just may or may not know that you have them. So that's why I call your attention to them. So let me just kind of do a screen share with you first. I'm in here in a moment. So one of them, these are all up on the society once you log in. Chapter President Healthy Chapter Initiative workbook. I went through this in detail. I mean, literally, I could have taken all night just to kind of walk you through these kinds of things. It's really well written. It really is. And I would say that even if I had written it, but I didn't, it's really well done. I mean, it truly is a resource. If it's been a while since if you've seen it, I would go back and certainly I would take a look at it. It really does cover a lot of the things that I would normally cover in terms of even our longer president's session. So that's one. So I will scroll that back up so you can see the title. And that's the Chapter President Workbook and the Healthy Chapter Initiative. Another one that you have that I thought was worth sharing with you is the Chapter Leader Quick Guide. And this tends to be a little bit more administrative in terms of, let me see if I can open up that a little bit, fit width. This tends to be a little bit more administrative kinds of things, but it's kind of a quick and dirty, this is where I can go to find out what I need kind of piece. And again, it's done with a lot of hyperlinks in there to kind of take you to kind of the latest. And as you can see, this was only done in November of 19. So this is a pretty accurate resource. So the Chapter Leader Quick Guide. If this is your first go round as a chapter president, something that got written back in years ago and then got updated, as you can see here, in November of 17. And I got to admit, I went through these earlier today, and I'm not so sure that a lot of them have changed. Let me say it in the positive. I think this is something that you can count on. I don't believe that there's been a lot of changes to this document that haven't been published. The business of barbershop. And basically what this kind of walks you through is what are those things that you need to do, what are those things that you need to do every month? And it literally takes you between yourself, your secretary, and the treasurer. And then it literally kind of takes you through kind of on a month by month perspective, what kinds of things might be scheduled throughout the calendar year. It's a great little guide to be able to kind of take keep it someplace handy. It'll kind of act as kind of a get out of jail free card in terms of making sure that stuff's not really going to slip through the crack. Again, it's got enough detail in there that you can follow it pretty simply, and if not, that's where guys like Rob France and your chapter counselors and CSLT people and other resources can say, I'm not, I read this, but I'm not sure I really understand exactly what this means. Can you help me out? And that we've got resources to be able to do that. So those are the 3 docs that I wanted you to make sure are already up on the society website in terms of documents. What I can do is in the email that we'll send out, that we're sharing each other's emails, I can put the web addresses or the web links into those things. I believe you will need to be signed in terms of your membership number in order to be able to get access to them. If you really run into problems, let me know. I've downloaded all of these on my end. Just in case somebody really gets stuck, I can forward it to it, but it's probably just as easy for you to download it right onto your system. But there's some really wonderful resources on that.
Is it in the documents area on the site?
It should be, yes.
Yep, that's right. So
Great,
search for the
thanks.
title, and usually that's pretty good to find the title.
I have to say, I had a hard time finding a lot of this stuff. It wasn't very easy to find for me anyway.
So let me stop share and reshare.
Yeah. I mean, I found it eventually, but it wasn't super easy.
And so, Doug, you're logged in actually as yourself, right?
Correct.
Got it.
So you have a couple of things here. You have the society business and policy under the chapters and membership piece, and this will be slower. And now that I'm sharing with all of you guys,
right? But
you'll also see documents there as well.
But does the search find it? Business of
Well, for
barbershop?
example, one of the things that I was looking for was healthy chapter initiatives, and I found a lot there. And then the chapter business resources. This was really what I keyed in on to be able to get all those.
Yeah.
So wait, which one did you click to get that again?
Chapter business resources.
Yeah, but when you first get to the page, go back to the very beginning. Where did you get that? You got
you
chapter.
See my cursor moving over here on
okay, yeah, chapter and members. Okay.
Right.
Chapters and membership, and then I scroll down, and the 2 things that I found that were really helpful was healthy chapter initiative, because and then chapter business. I think the president's guide was part of healthy chapter was here, and some of the other documents that I've shared are in chapter business resources.
No, this is great.
I just want to make sure you know what you have, and I'm going to give you all my my cell number. If you have a piece of pencil.
Piece of pencil. Which piece?
I'll use the one that has the tip on it.
It's so much easier than writing on the side.
Right. I know.
Here's my cell, 908 578 2457. And you have my permission to, even though I'm not part of the formal Mid-Atlantic structure at this point, you have my permission to give me a call and say, hey, can we talk about blah, blah, blah? And the answer is going to be yeah. And we'll put some time on the calendar to make that work. And that can be about anything that we talked about tonight, or anything just in general that you want to talk about from an organizational perspective or an organizational structure perspective. Because I realize that we're talking about tonight in 2.5 hours, what I normally talk about with when we're doing this live from 8:30 to 4:30 became 7 to 9:30 tonight. So it's so I've got a lot more resources at my disposal than we've got time to cover this evening.
Thank you, Doug.
You're quite welcome. So let's go back. I understand that if somebody is in a position where they have to log off or whatever, I understand, but I do want to just see if we can get back just a little bit here to the how do we get reopened, so to speak, and see if there's some other things that we need to address, because I know those are real live issues that we're going to be dealing with. The one at the end, we talked about kind of the privacy and understanding the circumstances of others. This might be one of those ones that you'd be better off, Bob, having somebody designated on the board in a limited number of somebodies, making some phone calls to members, not so much from a, oh, hi, how are you perspective, but really trying to, without violating any HIPAA laws, trying to say, can we kind of talk off the record just for my ears only, in terms of kind of what are your thoughts about coming back and what are your concerns and so on.
It's funny that you say that, because while you were, Steve is smiling, he chatted me directly saying, gee, with that issue, do we send surveys, but surveys don't work? I literally wrote back to him 10 seconds ago, we may need to spend a few weeks on the phone speaking directly with the membership, because it's that touchy as a subject. And then I realized, well, then we also have to make sure that we know which board members we delegate that task to, because some people they could be more tactful and have it a more yeah. So yes, it is that because it's that touchy. This is such a really personal issue, and because it's not going to be clean. It's never going to be clean.
Correct. And the other thing is I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on TV. So Steve, make sure I stay out of jail on this one in more ways than one. But I would encourage that whoever is making that phone call, that be an extremely limited group of people. And I would also encourage it that no names get associated with any of those comments.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, I would encourage you to do it on pencil and paper, so something that can be shredded as opposed to something that could even remotely find its way into electronic medium. From a protection perspective, I would make sure that from a protection perspective, I went belt and suspenders to make sure that no comments could ever be attributed back to any individual, even if I ended up doing the equivalent of doing a random number assignment, to names, and that who knows the number of that random assignment. So if you wanted to say, well, number 37 responded this way, but maybe one person would have that number in terms of what corresponds to number 37 or something like that. But I would really go privacy to the max on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, any comments from a legal beagle perspective? You're on mute.
Yeah, it's really, I don't think there's that as much legal sensitivity, because we're not really medical professionals sharing medical advice. I think it's more of a sensitivity issue rather than a legal issue.
Thank you. Let me open this up for anybody on the. Steve said double-blind phone interview. Steve, why don't you you want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean it more in jest.
Yes.
Working in the pharma industry for a bit, that's the whole thing. And I'm sure everybody reading the news daily, you're learning a lot more about clinical trials and the protocols necessary to roll these vaccines out. I just think it's good to hear that it's more of a sensitivity issue rather than a HIPAA issue. It's whether or not the group as a whole is going to be able to allow people who choose not to get the vaccine. It's, I think, Bob, you were talking around it a little bit, but I think that's, kind of where my head is what about those people who just choose to not do that? And how do we still integrate them into our community? It's just a very challenging and as you also said, Bob, it's not a clean situation. I don't know if there's a right answer. It's just something that I think we're all going to have to navigate.
Yeah, because we don't know the percent required immunization in a group to protect the whole group, and we won't know that till very far along, So
I can tell you that as a brigader, that Don Schreiber, who's the chief muckety-muck for all the brigades, has put together a task force that's made up of epidemiologists and all those kinds of things that take a pretty strong opinion that if the brigades are going to get together, that one of the entrance rules into the ball game should be that everybody coming together should be vaccinated.
unless, and then there'll be a short list. So we already know that means some people, is this allergy problem going to manifest throughout? Things like that. So
then you have to worry about certification. You're going to require all those people to deliver a vaccination certificate.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be hard.
Yeah, it's going to be very hard.
So I'm thinking on these kinds of things, though, kind of thinking them through, knowing that we don't know where the herd immunity piece is going to kick in reality, not knowing, yes, we certainly have some other questions in terms of some what ifs and some scenarios.
Okay, Doug, will you be able to share, or will the brigade be able to share the criteria that you're talking about? Because even though it might not be absolute, it sounds like something that's been very well researched. Love to see it.
Yeah, that can, I will make sure that I will secure Don's permission, but I know I have permission to send it out to board members and at least in my brigade. So I'm assuming that it's going to be more widespread than that. But just as background, in our own Mid-Atlantic district, we have Dr. George Korch as a resource. For those of you who don't know George, he was in charge of epidemiology for the U.S. Army Research and Infectious Diseases Labs. So this is not a guy who's giving you kind of, a half-baked opinion on something. This is how he basically, he's basically done congressional testimony and all this other kinds of stuff over the years. So when he has a tendency to talk, people have a tendency to listen. So this is not just kind of, oh, hey, well, this is what I think. Well, yeah. You know how some people's thoughts are worth more than others? Well, this is one of those examples where this is not just idle words. So yeah, I can try to get that out to you guys.
Is he in the brigade?
Yes.
I would also think that there's going to be some guidance at some point from BHS. They've been working with the other groups, the music educators and the other groups that have been doing and working with epidemiologists, and I know one in particular here at the University of Maryland they were working with, they provided a document early on about what should be done when singing together, and before really there was enough known about being super spreaders and that kind of thing. And I think the last document from them came out, I believe, in October or sometime around the 1st of November. So I would expect that some of that information will be updated as things roll out also, because the concerns are, because I think you do get into when you start collecting things like asking people to sign releases and things like that, I think you're walking on, if you have no, what's your liability, those kinds of things are all going to be issues. We already know that the insurance doesn't cover, or insurance as a chapter does not cover any of that kind of stuff, nor am I aware of any liability that's been released by Congress or anyone else. So for companies and corporations.
I'm glad you raised that, Jay, because I think that is a legal issue. I think if we, the leaders of our respective chapters, make a decision that it's good for us to, good and safe for us to come back and sing, and then people come and sing and they get sick, you know, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, and I know a number of guys that have those concerns. So
yeah, So Doug, you know, this conversation is fascinating based on just the title of our session, and leadership, and we're seeing crises of leadership at every level in our country, and if each one of us has to pay really close attention that we don't fall into that same, you know, pit of poor leadership at every level. I'm not just talking from the president on. I'm talking about all the way through. You know, it's people keep dropping the ball because they don't know how to lead, and you know, we've got a bunch of months here to prepare our leadership ourselves to do the right thing with our chapters, and we really have to pay attention. This is tough stuff.
There's no question about it. I mean, to say that we're on uncharted territory is the understatement of the century. I think what I talked about early on, however, about framing the questions is really the critical issue here. Nobody believes that our crystal ball is going to be any better than anybody else's crystal ball. But I think if we start, what I've been encouraging company executives to think through, and I would encourage you on the call to do the same thing, is what markers do you want to start to put going forward that would start to say, when we see this, we believe that that's an indication that we can start to do that. And I do believe that scenario planning is worth doing. I really do. Because one of the questions that you guys raised that you wanted to get out of tonight that I really do want to have a viable discussion on is, right now, most of what we're talking about on the obstacles tend to be internal to us being able to get back together. But I also want to be thinking about what is kind of looking outside of the chapter, knowing that fundraising, you know, is an issue, and a lot of times funds come in either via public performances or, you know, private performances, and, you know, for organizations and so on. What kinds of things do you want to start to think through in terms of what do we need to do, number one, to ensure anybody who's gonna write us a check that we're taking precautions, and what precautions are we going to ask before we go perform somebody, you know, for somebody, you know. And again, I realize there's going to be state and local health guidance on this, so I don't think we're going to be in a position of making stuff up. But I think who in the organization is going to be responsible for really staying on top of what the local rules are, including if you're going to sing someplace outside of your town, knowing how barbershop chapters are regional to a large degree in nature. How are we going to make sure that if we're going to sing someplace in a jurisdiction, who's going to make sure that we're complying with the jurisdictional rules in terms of where you're going to take your chorus to sing? Again, it doesn't have to be an impossible answer, but it probably ought to be something that somebody that you trust to really stay on top of these things is going to be paying attention to. I wouldn't have it as a committee of, oh, well, everybody can kind of check it out. I don't think this is one of those everybody assignments. I think this is something that you need to have somebody really designated to really be paying attention to these kinds of things, up to and including being really clear from a performance perspective. If we're going to perform for your group, these are our ground rules that will actually show up that day. I mean, if you were going to go in and sing for a nursing home or something along those lines, are you only going to sing for a nursing home where 100% of their patients and nursing staff has been vaccinated. If it is, the risk to you is probably going to be pretty low. But those are some kinds of things that kind of thinking through these things, so to speak, in the cold light of day, as opposed to waiting and making this decision in May when somebody calls, hey, we got an opportunity to make $500 by going to sing on such and such in a week and a half, and now trying to kind of organize your chorus to do that is not something that I recommend. I think you need to think through these scenarios in terms of what are going to be the things that you're going to say yes to. I think we need to get way ahead of that and not be reactionary on it. I think you need to be proactive.
So the new reality is, who would have thought a barbershop chapter would need a chief medical officer?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah,
and legal counsel.
Kind of. And you know, again, I'm certainly I would expect, I'm assuming that Steve Kirsch is still on the line. Is he?
Oh, he had to leave.
No, he had to bug out.
Okay, but I'm certainly hoping that somebody, you know, between, you know, Rob's resources and so on, and what's happening with the, you know, like the other group between BHS and so on, that there'll be some guidance that says, yeah, these are the kinds of things we think we need to take into consideration. But absolutely proactively kind of looking at that.
I'm amazed. I received a call the other day for someone that wanted a quartet from our chapter to go sing to somebody. I was like, you do know that there's a pandemic, right?
That's just a minor inconvenience, Jay.
Yeah, we've had some of those too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and how you handle those, how do you handle that correspondence back? You know, as opposed to saying, have you been under a rock for the last year?
Yeah.
Right.
No, I very understanding with a nice phone call, and you know, and yeah, that's how I ended up handling it.
You know, this is what and one of the things that I'm a big believer in when it comes to customer service and service is always being able to say, this is what we can do for you, as opposed to this is what we can't. What can you do? You know, can you get them on can you get them scheduled with a performance later on? Can you send them a recording of something that you guys have done? Or can you arrange a quartet to do something like through Jamulus, for example, so that you can still meet their needs, even if it's through non-traditional means of being able to? How can we get to yes, I guess, is the question that I'm thinking about here. Let's talk a little bit about the haves versus have-nots and group splits. There's two things that I think are gonna impact that. One of which we've already talked about, and that's kind of how do you make the message heard, and how do you continue to talk about inclusivity, if you will, kind of going forward. I think part of the main message has got to be, we want you to join us when you can. And whether that be kind of on Zoom calls, whether that be live rehearsals, whether that be public performances. But I think that combination with what help, if any, do you need from us? Does somebody need some help setting up some kind of technology that they may or may not even know that they have access to, but that they just don't know it? But again, think of all the ways that we can say, we want you to come along for the ride, and just really managing that. Come on along. We've been in this together so far. We're gonna get through this together, and you're gonna join us whenever you can. Those are certainly messages that I would encourage you to to kind of just keep playing on over and over and over again. Do not under communicate that message that we want you, that we do want you to come along for the ride.
Or if you are technology enabled, it's like, so we're going to have two different ways that you can participate, right? If you feel comfortable joining us, on the risers or in person, that's great. If not, we have another option for you, which is what we've been doing, right? Or something like that. So maybe there's a hybrid in there somewhere, probably.
One of the things that I experienced yesterday at Somerset Hills is we've been doing the Hot Rods and Harmony piece. And while we were doing the Hot Rods and Harmony piece, meaning that we were all singing in our own cars with a microphone, sure enough, we had 3 people that participated in that event via Zoom from their own homes.
Exactly right.
So here you had the combination of kind of trying to be as inclusive as we possibly can. So I think, I guess I would encourage, before you say no to somebody that we can't do something, I would just really ask you to just double check that. Let's make sure that we're not in quadrant 1, that we just don't know what we don't know. And that's trapping people. Reach out to somebody like Rob and say, I've got these circumstances. What can we do? As opposed to, let's not be quick to think about what we can't do.
Yep.
Yeah, so we've done that. We've done a lot of virtual performances with submitting videos, and some of the guys, they're not singing, and so they've said I can't do it because my voice is terrible. So I tell them, listen, I'm the only one that's going to know that I threw away your audio. Just send me your video. Just sing the song as loud as you want. I'm the only one, and I won't even listen. I mean, we had a guy that had a massive stroke. He lost his he's got Broca's aphasia. He can't even speak. He submitted 3 videos for our holiday show, and then I use him to shame the other guys who are on the sideline. So yeah, you can be inclusive, but I just want to make sure that we don't fracture, somewhere in October,
right,
where some guys forge ahead, maybe a little too early. Everyone else gets upset, gets angry with them, and that kind of a split, where there's a philosophical argument, because we've had that already. Guys want to get together and we're like, we can't. And Steve's been very strong about, at the board level, we cannot as a group. If you want to get together and stand under a tree and sing, you could do that, but the board cannot discuss those things. And some of the board members are those people. So I could see this coming up over the next bunch of months repeatedly. And that's the split that I'm referring to, the schism, like the church.
No question.
Yeah.
No question. And Bob, if I can be a resource to you as you're going through those, or Steve, if I can be a resource to you going through, I'll be more than happy to continue to talk with you guys offline about that.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah.
I tried to capture. I know that you got some issues that we haven't gotten to. Is there anything in particular that's really truly burning in your brain that you want to make sure that we get to before we break? Because I'm watching the time. I'm okay, but I don't want to overstay my welcome with you guys.
Well, there's one that it's there a few times. The new reality, will there be an inertia on people's part because my wife says I'm probably going to never leave the house ever. That's her fear. Are people just going to not want to get in their car? And, are we going to be experiencing that at a social level? That kind of thing.
My gut feeling is, based on research I'm reading, the answer is going to be yes.
Yes. A certain percent of people.
Well, it's going to be a pretty high percentage, I think. Yeah. Quite candidly, the numbers, the one survey that I saw from a little known organization, I think it was Gallup, was order of magnitude 90% of people want to work from their office 1 day a week. And it's down to into the 40% range or something like that want to go to the office 4 or more days a week. So I think that, to me, that tells me two things. That the whole idea of people commuting, and putting themselves in a spot where they're burning through gas and tolls and tires and oil changes and whatever that length of time to get from where they are to their traditional office, that they'd rather spend that time doing something else. That said, I'm thinking that our chapter meetings better be the most engaging,
right,
entertaining, and I'm not talking about entertaining in terms of purely fun and games, but we better really, really, really make sure that we know what our chapter members as customers want.
right.
When it comes to providing outstanding customer service, there's oftentimes a graphic. Let me hit save here for a minute, and I want to show you this. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, I'm already amazed at how far some of our members drive to come to our rehearsals. Up to hour, and some crazies up to 2 hours.
Well, one thing we've been very successful with is we've set projects for our members to engage in.
Yeah, we've done the same.
That's made a very big difference in getting people's engagement.
Right. That makes sense.
One of the things when I do our sessions live, I have you draw this 2/2 box, because every consultant in the world is really good at drawing 2/2 boxes. If you can't explain the world in 2/2 boxes, you don't really know what you're talking about. And up here where it currently says your role and others' role, I have you fill in that when you're the customer, in the others' role is typically supplier. So when you're a customer, what is it that you want, and from whoever is your supplier? When you're a customer, what is it that you don't want from a supplier? And then I ask you to turn your hat around and start from the bottom looking forward. When you're a supplier, what is it that you want from a customer? And when you're a supplier, what is it that you don't want from a customer? And when you do that, what you find is this target really becomes pretty important, because if we can give people what they want and not give them what they don't want, they're more likely to give us what we want and less of what we don't want. By a quick nod of your head, does that make sense to you from an outside world perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now I take that exercise after filling it out, and it normally takes 15 or 20 minutes. And then I say, okay, when you're a chapter president, for example, what is it that you want from your musical director? What is it that you don't want from your musical director? When you're you're spinning your head around, if you were the musical director, what is it that you would want from a chapter president? What would you want? What is it that you don't want from a chapter president? What that typically leads to kind of clarity in terms of really what is that middle ground. And it truly is understanding it's all about internal customer service. I can do that same thing as the president. What do you want from your music VP? Or as the president, what do you want from your membership VP or your treasurer or your secretary? But I also, again, I always ask you to flip your hat. And so the two people that are involved in this always fill out all 4 boxes, so that you're always trying to look at the world through somebody else's perspective, and sitting down and then kind of talking through this. What's fascinating is when you're a board member, or when you're the board, what is it that you want from the guys on the risers? What is it that you don't want from the guys on the risers? And when you're guys on the risers, what is it that you want from your board? And what is it that you don't want from your board? That has led to some really, really interesting discussions over the course of time. And I tie that into the servant leadership model that if our role is to be able to provide outstanding customer service, until we really know what somebody wants and what they don't want, we're just guessing. And why guess when we can have conversations with people and they'll tell us? So those are some thoughts in terms of kind of tying those things together. You may be able to use something similar to this, that in terms of what is it that you don't want in terms of us singing together. I mean, there may be some you may get some interesting information from the people you have phone calls with that says, I don't want there to be a lot of groups where people are going to feel some kind of pressure to get together until we're really ready to know that what we're doing is really safe. I mean, that might be one of the things that kind of comes out from the, what is it that you want from well, I'm picking Wesco just because I'm staring at Bob. What is it that you want from Wesco between now and Labor Day? What is it that you don't want from Wesco between now and Labor Day? Because I'm kind of making the assumption, all kidding aside, knowing that the average age of the average barbershopper in our system is north of 55. And by the way, you can actually check what your age distribution is on the Mid-Atlantic website, thanks to a program that Mike Kelly put in at my request. You could pretty much have an idea of when your members are likely to have gotten, by following the news, kind of likely to have gotten kind of vaccinated in terms of minimizing organizational risk. Let me stop talking for a second and take yourselves off mute. Kind of Penny for your thoughts. What are you thinking?
Buckle my seatbelt.
I think it's going to be rough because a lot of guys are going to say, I want to come back right now.
Yeah.
You know, especially some of the older guys. He says, I don't care. I'm just going to come back and sing.
Well, that's how I feel. And I want to come back, but we got to hold this horse back here.
Yeah.
I can give you a firsthand experience. I think some of the, I don't know if they're still here. Dave Sipley, you might remember. Maybe not. I don't know. There was a performance early on in August. Rusty would remember. It was Hunterdon chapter that did this, where they went and performed for someone safely with microphones and FM transmitter and all that. But then at the end, they all wanted to clump together and sing one together with the person they were singing to, their buddy who had retired from the chorus, and so then they all got together. It's just like a magnet. It was undeniable, right? And so they kind of broke what they were going to do is they were going to stay distant 6 feet or more. Well, it didn't happen. And they were shaking hands and hugging and all that kind of stuff. It's like one of the guys got really ticked off and actually walked away and said, no, this is not what was supposed to happen. So
we had a bunch of parking lot rehearsals.
Yeah.
And that was great.
Yeah.
But it's, half the, we did the hybrid solutions. We had, I bought 100-foot Cat 5 wire so that we could wire internet and a laptop out in the parking lot.
There you go.
But I mean, it's solutions like that. But it's the singing together and the hearing. Yeah. That's what everybody wants.
Well, there's nothing like being in a stairwell with your quartet and going nuts, right? That's why we do it.
Yeah. And I think from an outsider perspective, and I don't mean to be maudlin about this, but I want everybody around me to live long enough that we can do that again.
Right.
That's the that to me, that I'm not willing to trade off, the equivalent of the world's best tag, to lose somebody that I can sing with for the next 10 years. That's the trade-off, that I'm trying to keep in.
I think we need a lot more data before we can reach that point where we're going to be comfortable to even think about getting back to normal meetings. And I think we're going to have to really be flexible over the next, 3 to 6 to 9 months. As that data comes in, we'll have to process it constantly, and we'll all be in a better position to make decisions as we progress.
This is not a political statement, but the concept of the vaccination, that's good. Hey, were you vaccinated? Yes, I was. But you probably still need to have a test that shows a negative result, is really what you're going for there. Just getting the vaccine is one thing, but that doesn't, in most cases, it's going to prevent you from contracting the disease or passing it on or something like that. But you really need the test to know. So it's a combination, I think.
In my head, and I don't have any more information than probably anybody else does on the call at this point. In my head, what I'm thinking about is that as the vaccine rollout becomes more predictable, as all the
right.
Once we get past the Christmas, New Year, holiday, snowstorm stuff, we kind of get into some regular logistics routine. That my suspicion is that the great preponderance of barbershoppers, just based on their chronological age, are probably going to be vaccinated by the 1st of May, would be my guess. I have no facts behind that, but if you said to me kind of in my head, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking that by May 1st, May 15th, I would expect a good number of people that I know will have gotten vaccinated one way, shape, or form, because either they're in higher risk or because somebody in their family is a higher risk, or, that they've gotten the logistics of getting the vaccinations out are working.
The only issue with that is our director's 30. So that's,
and also the locations where we rehearse will have they'll still be regulated, and states will still have size. I mean, if we're a large chorus, so states may still not allow. They just may say it doesn't matter what your age is. You cannot congregate in groups larger than. And then if you're in a public place or you're in a school, many of us use schools, churches, whatever, which will then have other rules. So it's just a series of levels of, as you said, what are those sort of targets that we're going towards to make our decisions?
Bob, yeah. I saw this on an interview weeks ago, that the same technology that's used to fly into airports, I think it's similar to stuff that they use for the TSA kind of stuff, Clear.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing an interview with a large venue, like a Rose Bowl or a Giant Stadium kind of thing. And even though this goes back weeks, they said, we absolutely believe that the technology already exists, so to speak, that somebody's going to walk in and you're going to push a button and it's going to show you your vaccination status. It's either going to flash, somebody's going to hit the equivalent of a barcode, and it's either going to flash green or red that says you're allowed to go in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that they talked about pretty unequivocally is that if you have a stadium that's scheduled to seat 80,000 people, they can't go indefinitely with putting 7,000 people in a stadium that was built for 80,000.
Oh, yeah, no, it's all, yeah.
So somewhere along the line, I got a feeling that science and economics are going to somehow bend into a curve that somebody goes, you know what, if we want to put 80,000 people in Giant Stadium, if all 80,000 people have been vaccinated, there's no reason on the planet why all 80,000 people can't enjoy whatever that
right,
venue.
right. There's tough decisions there, because there's just like we accept the flu as a source of sickness and death, we do. And a lot of people die. Tens of thousands of Americans die annually from the flu. Right. We know that. Now we're in the 300,000, and that's horrific. But we could handle 30, 40,000 dying from COVID, because it's like the flu. It's that gray area in between that we come out of COVID and we treat it like the flu. And we don't know how we're going to handle that psychologically. When are we going to make the switch and say, yes, the vaccine is 95% effective. The disease is still around, but I only have like a 1 in 10,000 chance of dying from it. Unlike I have a 1 in 300 chance of dying from it. And it's not like you're just going to snap a finger and say, aha, that's good, I'm ready to go. It's going to be a very tough decision. And unfortunately, it's going to be personal for most people. No one's going to give us that you do this. Yeah, it's tough.
Well, and I think that to your point, I think that's really critical, and that's why I think from a chapter leadership perspective, relying on we want you to come back when you're comfortable is critical, because quite candidly, I mean, some of this you'll probably find out when you make the individual phone calls that we've talked about.
Right.
But I have no idea, with the guys in Voices of Gotham, who's got a parent or who's got a sibling, that has certain health challenges that just never come up in the course of normal conversation. So I would encourage everybody, let's not make any fast assumptions about just because somebody looks healthy as a horse. We have no idea in terms of what other circumstances are going on in their life. And that's where I think we need to really be like ultra sensitive to how we are framing these
or their family or extended family, or right. So and all that, right?
I have a question that's only marginally related to all of this, which is some of you guys have talked about the singing in cars.
Yeah.
So when you're doing that in cold weather, do you have the engines running the whole time to keep you warm? How do you just get cold and bundle up? How do you do that?
Well, I can tell you what I'm doing. We try to comply with the 3-minute idling rule in New Jersey. So you'll turn your car on, put some heat in it. But one of the things that Hunterdon made available, you know the foam pipe insulation, the snap-on foam.
Yep.
Well, they provided that, and that goes along your driver's side window. And if you cut a little notch in it, you can put the wire in that, and then put your window up, and you stay pretty toasty.
Oh, you can stay warm for a while.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if it's a sunny day, you could get pretty warm in your car in the wintertime.
It's true.
Of course, that's when you open the windows.
Yeah. Right. And that'll work down to a certain temperature, right? I mean, if it's like 10 out, it might not work so easy.
It's all about innovation.
Yeah, of course.
That's exactly right.
So.
Innovation, it's intolerance for pain in order to hear chords.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Hey guys, I got to bail.
Well, I was
School
going to
night
say,
for me.
I was getting ready to declare victory, but thank you so much for hanging in. I hope this has given you some
Super helpful, Doug. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug.
Doug,
Yep.
thank
Thanks
you
for your participation.
And nice meeting you all. I think this is a great forum if we ever, we're all in the same boat here, just different places. So I think it'd be a great thing to have the email chain going among us as well.
Hey, Chris, let me ask you a question before you go then. Would you participate in a president's council periodically, like every 8 weeks or every other month or something like that?
Sure, be happy to.
Okay. It's an idea I'm sort of toying with.
Yep, I love it.
That's one.